The great space station known as the Ark was a place of power and fear. Built in the center of the galaxy, it was home to many alien species, some peaceful, but most were predators. These species had conquered planets, built mighty fleets, and were known for their strength and ruthlessness. But among them, in a crowded hall filled with laughter and noise, stood a human. His name was John Mills, and he was old, very old. His skin was wrinkled, his hair thin and gray, and his eyes tired from years of life lived. He had come from Earth, a planet far from the center of the galaxy. His body was frail, and it shook slightly as he stood in the midst of these mighty aliens, yet his calm and steady demeanor stood in sharp contrast to his appearance. The aliens surrounding him were not kind. They were laughing, pointing, and talking in their strange languages, mocking the old man. They couldn't believe a human, an old human at that, had the nerve to show up in their presence. After all, humans were not known for their strength. They were weak, small, and easily crushed. The predators who filled the hall thought that the human was just another easy target, someone they could ignore and laugh at. As the laughter continued, John stood tall. Despite the way his body felt, his face remained calm, his hands folded. In front of him, he had been through much worse in his life. He had seen battles, led troops, and faced death. But this was different. This was not a fight. It was a test of humanity itself. One of the aliens, a towering beast with long, sharp claws, walked up to John with a snarl. His name was Jorax, the commander of the station's security force, and he was feared by all. Jorax loomed over the human, his eyes glowing with amusement. "What brings you here, old man?" Jorax asked, his voice deep and filled with mockery. "Are you lost, or just here to entertain us?" The other aliens around them laughed again. John could hear their voices echoing in the hall, but he remained quiet. He had no interest in joining their laughter. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady, but loud enough to be heard by all. "I'm here because Earth needs your help," John said calmly. At these words, the laughter stopped. It wasn't the kind of request they were expecting. Most beings who came to the station, especially humans, begged for help. They were weak, desperate, but this old man, he didn't beg. He spoke as though he had every right to stand in their midst, as though he was just as important as any of them. "You come here, to this station, asking for help?" Jorax's voice grew cold. "From us, you must be out of your mind." John's eyes met Jorax's. He didn't flinch. "I am asking for help, yes," he said, "but not in the way you think." Jorax tilted his head. "What do you mean?" he asked, intrigued despite himself. "I've come to ask for an alliance, a mutual understanding. Earth is not weak, and it's not defenseless. We've faced challenges before, some far worse than what you've ever seen," John said. A murmur ran through the crowd of aliens. They weren't used to humans speaking so boldly. Most of the humans they had encountered in the galaxy were terrified of them, quick to obey their orders or run from their might. But John was different. "An alliance," Jorax repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. "With you, a human. Do you not realize who you're talking to? We are the hunters, the predators. You are nothing but prey." John didn't hesitate. "You may be predators," he said slowly, "but we're human. And that, Jorax, is something you've clearly never understood." The room went silent. The aliens surrounding them stared at John, unsure of how to react. For a moment, even Jorax seemed taken aback. He had expected fear, perhaps pleading. But this human spoke with strength. "You think you can teach us something?" Jorax scoffed, stepping closer to John. "You come into our space, you speak of alliances, and you expect us to listen. We could destroy your planet with the flick of a finger. You are nothing in our eyes." John smiled slightly. "I don't need you to see me as anything," he said quietly. "I'm not here to prove anything to you. But if you think that Earth is weak, you're wrong. We're stronger than you realize." The aliens looked from one another, unsure of how to respond. Some of them chuckled, but the laughter was weaker now. John's words had planted a seed of doubt. The others, those who had once mocked him, started to pay attention. It was clear that this old man was not the fragile human they had expected. "Tell me," John continued, his voice growing stronger. "Do you know why humans have survived so long? It's not because we're strong like you. It's because we've learned to adapt, to survive, to find a way through the toughest challenges. We've been beaten, conquered, but we've always come back. We never give up. That's why you should be afraid." Jorax's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he didn't know how to answer. John was speaking the truth. Humanity had survived wars, disasters, and countless obstacles. They had learned to fight in ways the aliens could never imagine. The room was still as John's words echoed through the hall. He wasn't just speaking to Jorax, he was speaking to all of them. His presence had changed the mood in the room. The aliens, who had once laughed at him, now found themselves uncertain. This old man, this human, had stood his ground against the might of the galaxy's deadliest species. John Mills was not weak, and the aliens, for the first time, started to realize that humans might be the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, not because of their physical strength, but because of their never-ending will to survive. The atmosphere in the hall grew thick with tension after John's words. The once loud and mocking aliens were now quieter, their eyes shifting as they tried to figure out what to do next. John Mills had said something none of them expected. A challenge, but not a physical one. A challenge of ideas, of strength that wasn't measured in size or power, but in will. Jorax, the towering predax, still stood before him, but now there was something different in his eyes. The laughter had stopped, and a dark silence fell over the room. Jorax wasn't used to being questioned, let alone by an old human. But the more John spoke, the more Jorax wondered if there was something about humanity he didn't understand. "You speak of survival," Jorax said finally, breaking the silence, "but you haven't faced true danger. Human, you haven't known what it means to fight for your life every day. You think you are strong, but I've seen species rise and fall, and I've never seen a weak species survive for long." John stood firm, his voice steady. "Maybe we don't fight like you do, but we don't need to. We find other ways." Jorax's claws clicked together, his patience wearing thin. "Other ways? We'll see about that." With a sharp movement, Jorax gestured to the center of the room. A large, circular arena appeared in the floor, an ancient battleground used by many species for their most serious tests. "If you believe you can survive, human, then prove it. Show us that your other ways are enough." John looked around the room. The aliens' eyes were all on him, waiting for him to respond. The pressure was immense. They expected him to back down, to beg for mercy. But John did not. He knew what Jorax was doing. This was a test not just of strength, but of humanity itself. "I don't need to fight you to prove anything," John said calmly, stepping into the center of the arena. "But I will play your game." The aliens murmured among themselves. This was unexpected. John Mills wasn't the first human to visit the station, but he was the first one who hadn't run, begged, or cowered in fear. They had seen the terror in the eyes of others, but not in his. He was different, Jorax growled, clearly annoyed, but motioned for the arena to begin. "Let the test begin," he declared. His voice filled with authority. The lights above flickered, and a series of holographic projections appeared, simulating different environments, each designed to test a species' survival skills. The first test was a physical challenge. Massive creatures, similar to large, aggressive predators from various planets, appeared in the arena. They roared, their sharp teeth gleaming as they charged at John. The aliens watched closely, expecting John to run, to scream in terror, or at least try to fight. But John did none of that. Instead, he moved calmly, his eyes scanning the creatures with sharp focus. He waited, watching their movements carefully. As one of the creatures lunged toward him, John sidestepped with precision, allowing it to crash into a nearby pillar instead of attacking him. The other aliens blinked in surprise. The creature snarled and tried again. But John had already figured it out. He wasn't going to fight it. He was going to survive it. He moved with experience, evading every strike with ease, his movements graceful and calculated. To the aliens, This wasn't a fight, it was a dance. He was not only avoiding death, but making the predators look foolish. They were strong, yes, but John was using his mind, not just his body. The arena's environment shifted again, creating more obstacles, but John adapted quickly, weaving through them with ease, forcing the creatures to chase him in circles. For the first time, the aliens began to doubt their assumptions about humans. They watched the old man, so frail by their standards, move with the confidence of a seasoned warrior. Jorax growled again, more out of frustration than anger. He couldn't deny John Mills was proving something to them, something they hadn't expected. After a few more minutes, the creatures grew tired, and with a final twist, John outsmarted them. He had led them into a trap, a path where they were forced to fall into a pit created by the arena's shifting ground. As the creatures roared in frustration, John stepped back, taking a deep breath. He had won this round without ever laying a hand on them. The aliens were quiet now, their eyes wide with surprise. Jorax's expression was unreadable, but he was clearly intrigued. John's strategy had been flawless. It wasn't about strength, it was about intelligence, patience, and understanding. These were the qualities John had been speaking about when he described humanity's strength. Jorax was not used to being outsmarted. He had underestimated John Mills, and now he was beginning to see the human's point. Maybe humanity wasn't as weak as he had thought. The arena shifted again, and the next test began, a challenge of survival in an extreme environment. The room grew hot, with temperatures rising to unbearable levels, and strange alien winds began to blow. The aliens had expected John to falter. They had seen species fail before when faced with such conditions. But once again, John did not panic. He remained calm, his eyes studying the surroundings. He found a shaded area and took shelter, using his knowledge of survival to find water and food. The aliens in the audience looked on, astonished. They had assumed John would be unable to endure the harsh conditions, but he was handling it with remarkable skill. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the challenge ended. The room returned to its normal temperature, and the alien creatures vanished. Jorax, still standing, regarded John with a new level of respect. He had been wrong. This human was not weak. He was resilient. John stepped out of the arena, his expression calm, but his mind sharp. The aliens had tested him, and he had passed every challenge not through brute force, but through the very thing that had allowed humanity to survive for so long: ingenuity. Jorax looked down at John, his pride wounded but his curiosity piqued. "You have shown me something I did not expect, human," he said quietly. "You are not like the others." John looked up at him, his voice steady. "We're not like the others. We're human, and that's why we survive." The room was silent for a moment, and for the first time, the aliens understood something. Humanity had survived, not because they were stronger than everyone else, but because they knew how to adapt, to think, and to endure. The aliens were stunned. John Mills, an old human, had faced the most difficult challenges their station had to offer, and not only did he survive, he had done so without ever lifting a weapon or using brute strength. The tests were meant to prove the weakness of humanity, but they had only shown the strength of John's mind. The room was filled with murmurs. The Predaxes, known for their deadly claws and unrelenting strength, had been easily outwitted. The creatures in the arena had been outsmarted by a man who didn't even seem to have the physical power to match them. And now, as John stood quietly in the center of the hall, the aliens could do nothing but watch him. Unsure of what to make of this strange human, Jorax, still standing at the front, looked at John with a mixture of anger and admiration. He had expected to crush this human, to break his spirit with physical tests. Instead, John had passed every challenge with calmness, patience, and intelligence. It was clear now that humanity wasn't weak, but was it truly strong enough to be a threat? Jorax couldn't ignore the strange feeling of respect that was growing inside him. He had spent his life commanding armies and crushing species that dared challenge him. Yet this human, with his frail body and quiet confidence, had proven himself in ways Jorax could never have imagined. "You are different," Jorax said finally, his voice low but firm. I have never seen a human act the way you do. You do not rely on strength, but on your mind. He paused, looking at John with an unreadable expression. But can your people really be like you? John smiled faintly. You have no idea what humans are capable of. Jorax growled softly. I thought you would be weak. I thought Earth would be easy to conquer. But I was wrong. He seemed almost unsure of himself. Something that the aliens in the room rarely saw. Jorax wasn't used to being wrong, and the realization was unsettling. But John didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded, as if he had already known this moment would come. The aliens in the room, still watching, now seemed more curious than mocking. It was as if they had been shown a small glimpse of something powerful they had never considered before. John's words, his actions, and the way he had handled each test were becoming a mystery they couldn't solve. There was something more to humanity than just their appearance. John turned to face the council of alien leaders, who had been silent through all of this. The rest of the room was still, waiting for the next move. You've seen it now, John said calmly. We are not like you. We don't fight in the same way, but we will always survive. And we will always find a way to turn the odds in our favor. He paused, his voice lowering. Humans don't give up. We never stop, no matter what. One of the leaders, a member of the Kalen species with slick black skin and multiple eyes, stepped forward. His voice was smooth and calculating. You speak of survival, but every species survives in its own way. Some rely on strength, others on numbers. What makes you think you can convince us that humans are worth considering? John's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. Because you've seen us survive. Even when everyone believed we were nothing, we survived the wars that nearly destroyed us. We survived diseases that wiped out most of our population. We survived the challenges of space. We've been through it all and still stand strong. You underestimate our resilience. But that's the biggest mistake you can make. The aliens were quiet now, each one processing his words. Some of them still looked at John with doubt in their eyes, but others were starting to see what John was really saying. It wasn't about strength or numbers. It was about persistence, about overcoming impossible odds. Jorax stood there, deep in thought, watching the humans who were now in the hall with him. He could see it in their eyes. There was something dangerous about them, not because they were physically powerful, but because they would never stop fighting, never stop trying. Even when there was no hope, humans kept going. You really believe this? Jorax finally asked, his voice quiet but filled with curiosity. I know it, John replied, his voice strong. It's not just belief, it's what we are. You've tested me, and I've passed, but I'm not the only one. There are millions of humans like me, and they'll stand up just like I did. No matter the odds. Jorax studied John for a long moment, his mind working. The other aliens watched in silence, waiting for their leader to make a decision. I still do not understand, Jorax said, his voice heavy with doubt. But I know this. I have never seen a species like yours. Perhaps there is something in your kind that makes you dangerous, but not in the way we expected. John raised an eyebrow, a slight smile crossing his face. You're starting to get it. Jorax nodded slowly, the edge of a new respect forming in his voice. I will admit, human, that I am curious. You've shown me something I never expected. I've seen many species fall before me, but you're different. John's smile widened, though it was still small. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you. There was a long pause as the room's attention shifted from Jorax to John. Finally, Jorax spoke again, this time his voice filled with a weight that wasn't there before. I will not forget this. The galaxy has underestimated humanity, but I have a feeling that will change. John stood taller now, knowing that he had made an impact. Let's hope it changes before it's too late. The tension in the room was thick, like the air before a storm. The aliens were still unsure of what to make of John Mills. He had passed their tests, showing them sides of humanity they had never imagined. But in Jorax's eyes, there was still a challenge, a need to prove that humans were no different than any other species that had come before them. He couldn't allow himself to be swayed by respect alone. Enough. Jorax's voice broke the silence. His sharp, reptilian eyes were focused on John. I admit, you have impressed me, but your words and actions are nothing more than tricks, and tricks have limits. You claim that your species is strong, but I need to see it for myself. He took a step forward, his powerful presence filling the space. I will offer you a final test, human, a challenge that will prove once and for all if you are worthy of an alliance. John looked up, meeting Jorax's eyes with a calm gaze. I've already shown you what humanity is capable of, he replied, his voice steady. What more do you want from me? Jorax let out a low growl. You misunderstand, human. I don't want to hear more words. I want to see you face a real challenge. Something that will test not only your mind but your body. A battle against me. The room gasped. It wasn't the first time someone had faced Jorax in combat, but it was the first time a human had ever been offered such a challenge. Jorax was not just any alien, he was the leader of the Predaxes, a race of warriors feared across the galaxy. He was known for his unmatched strength and skill in battle. A challenge from him was no small thing. You think you can defeat me, human? Jorax continued, his tone cold and calculating. You may have escaped danger in my tests, but now you face a true predator. If you can defeat me, I will consider your offer for an alliance. But if you lose, you and your species will never be seen as anything but weak. John didn't flinch. He had expected this, in a way. The aliens were proud, and their pride would always lead them to test humanity's limits. But he wasn't about to back down. I don't need to defeat you, John said firmly. I don't need to prove anything to you, Jorax, but I will face you, because I believe humanity deserves your respect, not through brute force, but through the strength we carry in our hearts and minds. Jorax's lips curled into a smirk, clearly unimpressed by John's words. Very well, he said, his voice carrying a note of finality. The challenge will take place in the arena. We fight until one of us cannot stand. If you win, I will keep my word. But if you lose, your species will never gain the respect it seeks. John nodded, turning to face the arena once more. His heart was calm, but his mind was already working, already planning. He knew this would not be a battle of strength. He wasn't foolish enough to think he could beat Jorax in that way. No, this was a battle of strategy, just as the previous tests had been. The arena began to shift, changing into a dark and unforgiving battlefield, with towering walls and deep pits designed to challenge both the body and the mind. The lights flickered, casting long shadows over the ground. In the center of it all, Jorax stood, his massive form casting a long shadow. His eyes gleamed with excitement, eager to see the human crumble before him. John stepped into the arena, feeling the heat of the lights and the weight of the moment. The crowd of aliens watched silently, some with amusement, others with a kind of nervous anticipation. They knew Jorax's power, and they were curious to see how John would handle it. Jorax bared his teeth, his muscles rippling as he prepared for the fight. He was a creature of pure strength, his very presence radiating power. He had fought battles across the galaxy, tearing through enemies much stronger than John. But he had never faced a human like this. John took a deep breath, his mind focused, his heart steady. He didn't need to be the strongest. He didn't need to be the fastest. What he had was experience. He had faced death before and come out the other side. This wasn't about physical prowess. It was about outhinking his opponent, outmaneuvering him. The fight began with Jorax charging forward, his massive claws slashing through the air. John barely had time to move as the beast's claws raked past him, missing by inches. Jorax growled, swinging again with terrifying force. But John was already gone, moving with a speed that belied his age and frailty. The aliens in the stands murmured, watching in awe. John Mills, the old man, was not retreating in fear. He was not even fighting back with fists or weapons. Instead, he was using his surroundings, using the arena itself to stay out of Jorax's reach. Jorax roared. In frustration, he lunged again, but this time John was ready, with quick thinking. John used a nearby pillar to block the attack, sending Joraks crashing into it. The impact shook the arena, and for a moment, the entire room was silent. John didn't waste an opportunity. He moved quickly, leaping onto Joraks' back, grabbing a hold of one of the alien's massive horns. Joraks howled, trying to shake him off, but John held on tight, using his weight and momentum to force Joraks off balance with a final twist. John used the Predator's own strength against him, sending him stumbling to the ground. The crowd of aliens was silent. No one had ever seen Joraks lose his footing like that before. He was on the ground, his claws scraping the floor as he struggled to get back up. John stood over him, breathing heavily but with a calm expression. "This is not about strength," he said, his voice carrying across the arena. "This is about thinking ahead, outsmarting your opponent. You don't have to crush everything in your path to win. Sometimes the victory comes in the quiet moments and the patience." Joraks' eyes burned with fury, but there was also a flicker of respect. He rose slowly, his posture a little less confident, but still imposing. "You've proven something. Human," he said, his voice gruff. "You're not like the others." John didn't smile, but his eyes were steady. "I told you, we're human, and we're not weak." Joraks stood, his claws digging into the floor as he glared at John, the old human who had just outwitted him. The massive alien's eyes were filled with anger and something else, respect. For the first time, Joraks wasn't sure if he had the advantage. He had always relied on his strength to win, but John had shown him that there were other ways to succeed. The other aliens in the room were silent, their eyes fixed on the two figures in the arena. They had expected Joraks to crush the human, to show the world that no one could match his power. But John Mills had done something none of them had anticipated. He had survived, not by fighting harder, but by using his mind, his wits, and his patience. John stood tall, his breath steady, his body tired but unbroken. He knew that Joraks was still dangerous, but he had proven his point. The aliens had tested him, and he had passed every trial, showing them that humanity was far more than the weak, helpless species they had once thought. Joraks took a deep breath, the sound of it echoing in the arena. He was not used to losing, especially not in front of his people. But as he looked at John, he saw something in the human's eyes, something that made him hesitate. This wasn't just a fight, this was a turning point. "You have proven yourself," Joraks said finally, his voice low but filled with grudging respect. "I did not expect this. I did not think a human could stand against me, let alone outsmart me." He looked down at the ground, his claws scraping the floor as he collected his thoughts. "You have earned my respect, John Mills." John nodded, but his expression remained calm. He didn't need to hear Joraks' words. The aliens had seen for themselves what humanity was capable of. The battle wasn't about who could lift the heaviest weapon or strike the hardest. It was about survival, and humanity had survived. The room was still, the tension hanging in the air as the aliens processed what had just happened. John had faced one of their strongest warriors and had come out victorious, not through strength, but through strategy, endurance, and an understanding of the way the world worked. Joraks took another step forward, his massive form towering over John. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice gruff. "I thought humans were weak, that you were nothing but prey. But you have shown me that you are far more than that. You are adaptable, you are clever, and you are capable of great things." He paused, his gaze narrowing slightly. "But you have also shown me something else." John raised an eyebrow, unsure of what Joraks meant. "What's that?" he asked. Joraks' eyes flashed, and for a moment, the alien's pride seemed to take over. "Then I underestimated you," he said simply. "I thought I could crush you easily. But now I see that I have made a mistake. Humanity is not to be taken lightly." John gave a small, knowing smile. "That's what I've been trying to tell you." Joraks nodded, his expression softer now. "You've earned my respect, human. I cannot deny that. I will honor our agreement." He turned to the council of alien leaders, who had been silent throughout the battle. "We will leave Earth alone. Humanity will not be treated as prey, but as equals. You have proven that you deserve that respect. The other aliens in the room exchanged looks, some of them still uncertain, but all of them now aware that humanity was not as weak as they had thought. Jorax, the most powerful among them, had been forced to admit that he had been wrong. And with his words, the entire room seemed to shift. The atmosphere was different now, less mocking, less threatening. The aliens no longer looked at John with disdain. Instead, they looked at him with curiosity and something else, a growing sense of understanding. John's eyes softened as he looked around the room. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. This wasn't just about one victory in an arena. It was about changing the way these aliens saw humanity. It was about showing them that Earth was not a planet to be ignored or conquered, but a planet to be respected. You've made the right choice, John said, his voice calm but firm. But remember, this isn't just about one battle. It's about understanding each other. We don't have to be enemies. We can be allies if you're willing to listen, to learn from each other. Jorax nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. Perhaps we can learn something from you after all. The other aliens began to murmur, exchanging quiet words, their expressions less hostile than before. For the first time, they were not thinking of conquest. They were thinking of partnership. John stepped back, allowing Jorax to speak. It was clear that the alien leader had been shaken by the events of the battle. He had come to the arena expecting to destroy the human and prove the superiority of his kind. Instead, he had faced a human who had not only survived but had earned his respect. You have shown us that strength is not always measured in size or power, Jorax continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. It is measured in the will to survive, in the ability to adapt and overcome, and in that, humans are strong beyond measure. John didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered, and the aliens had received it. They no longer saw him as just an old man, a frail human who had wandered into their domain. They saw him as someone to be respected, a symbol of what humanity could achieve. When pushed to the edge. As the aliens began to leave the arena, John stood in the center, his heart still steady. He had done it. He had proven that humanity was not something to be taken lightly. He had shown them that humans had a strength beyond what any alien species could understand. And in the process, he had earned their respect. The silence in the arena was almost deafening. The once mocking aliens now stood in awe of the old human who had not only survived, but had earned their respect. The alien leaders, including Jorax, the fearsome commander of the Predaxes, had all witnessed something they never expected: a human standing tall, calm, and composed, having faced the ultimate test and come out victorious. John Mills had done what no other human before him had done. He had proven that humanity was not just a species of weaklings to be conquered, but a species of strength, adaptability, and resilience. He had shown them that Earth, the blue planet far away in the corner of the galaxy, was not to be underestimated. As the aliens slowly began to leave the arena, their eyes still focused on John, the old man stood still, his heart calm and steady. The battle was over, but in a way, it had only just begun. He knew that the true challenge now was to ensure the respect he had earned for humanity wasn't just a fleeting moment. This was a chance to change the way the galaxy saw Earth and its people forever. Jorax, his massive form still towering over the human, stepped forward again. The anger and arrogance that had once been in his eyes had faded, replaced by something else, something that was a rare sight for an alien warrior like him. Respect. Human, Jorax said, his voice much softer than before. I underestimated you. I believed your kind to be nothing more than prey. But you have proven me wrong. You have proven that you are not like the others. He paused for a moment, searching for the right words. Your strength lies not in the power of your bodies, but in your minds, your hearts, and your will to survive. You have shown us what true strength looks like. John looked up at Jorax, the alien leader's words sinking in. He had expected a battle of strength, a test of who was the strongest, the fiercest. What he hadn't expected was that this would become a test of humanity's true nature. And he had passed. We are not like you, John said. his voice firm but gentle. "We don't need to be. What we have is something you can't measure with your strength or your claws. We have the ability to change, to adapt, to grow stronger when we are pushed to the brink. That's why we survive. That's why we thrive." Jorrax nodded, a sign of agreement, though the alien was still processing what had happened. He had seen countless species rise and fall, but none had ever faced him in the way John had. It wasn't just about outsmarting him. It was about the quiet determination that John had shown. The willingness to face the impossible and keep fighting, even when there seemed to be no chance of winning. As Jorrax turned to face the other alien leaders, he raised his voice, not in anger, but in something that resembled pride. "This human has earned his place among us," he said. "And with that, he has earned the respect of all the species on this station. Earth is no longer to be considered weak. From this moment on, we will stand as equals." The room was still as the alien leaders absorbed Jorrax's words. It was an unprecedented declaration. No alien species had ever been forced to admit that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. But the events of the past hours had proven that the humans were not just survivors. They were fighters, thinkers, and ultimately winners, one by one. The alien leaders stepped forward, some reluctantly, others with more enthusiasm, to offer John the respect. They had seen his strength, his strategy, and his calm under pressure. And they knew now that any species that could produce a human like John Mills was not to be ignored. John, still standing tall, nodded to each of them. He wasn't interested in the praise. What mattered to him was that humanity now had a chance. The respect he had earned for Earth could open doors, create alliances, and shift the way the galaxy looked at his people. This was the beginning of something new, a new chapter in human history. As the last of the alien leaders walked away, Jorrax turned to John once more. His expression was less fierce now, more thoughtful. "I may have underestimated your species," he admitted, "but I've learned something today. Humanity is not weak. You have shown us that." John smiled, a small, knowing smile. "You're starting to understand. We might not be the strongest, but we are strong in ways you don't yet see, and that's what will make the difference." Jorrax watched him for a moment, his gaze softening. "Perhaps we will learn more from you in the future," he said. John nodded. "I hope so. But remember, this humans never forget, and when we make allies, we make them for life." As Jorrax walked away, John remained in the arena, his thoughts turning to Earth. He had done what he set out to do. He had proven that humanity was not to be dismissed, that Earth was a planet of strength, even if it wasn't seen in the same way as the alien predators. What mattered now was ensuring that the alliances they had forged would last, that humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. The future was uncertain. But John Mills knew one thing for sure. Humanity had earned its place in the stars. No longer would they be seen as weak prey. They would be seen as equals, and that was just the beginning.